Hello, Simply Support community. It's me again, Carrie, and Joshua's here this
Hello.
time.
Good to see everybody.
We've been doing some spring cleaning today, picking up the yard and organizing the workshop, and we've got spring blooms outside, which is
Beautiful.
gets me really excited. I love wildflowers, flowers of any sort, I guess, really. But today's Q&A, Hump Day Q&A, and the Hump Day shirt a question has been posed, or I guess a concept of how to live authentically and not based on shoulds and shouldn'ts. And I think that is a lot of internal conflict and a lot of this concept of self, which is confusing, if I'm honest. And maybe it's because I'm just learning it myself within the past year, giving myself permission to accept it as a concept. And because I don't have any idea what's going on here in this human experience realistically. And me and Joshua talk about that quite often in terms of our surrendering of, we really don't know, but we can just know some things, and because of on a resonating level, so to say, of, oh, I read this information and it makes me feel a certain way, and where I feel like, oh, I have a knowing and I can trust this information.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So
like, yeah. I also agree with that. It's like even though what you read in is not necessarily true either, because what really is, I guess we both agree that we will never know the actual truth. It's like, but when you read something that resonates and makes you feel a certain way, it's like, oh, that becomes like a truth, and then it can play out and change your experience. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and it's like through this human experience, together as a community of alive entities, share resources to facilitate human experience right now. So whatever tools happened back in the day, or whatever literature was around or music was around, those were the resources, and that's what moved people through their human experience in one way or another of finding happiness, love, peace, so on and so forth.
Like
so
the rubric for life almost.
right. So when a book like this comes out in 2014,
that has no cover, shout out to no cover, because the dog ate it literally.
So when a book like this comes out in 2014, it's like, oh, this is a tool, this is a resource. And when I read it, it makes me feel a certain way of understood. I feel understood in my confusion and chaos about self, and what is the point of all of this, and who am I, and what am I doing? And
I like that, understanding confusion and chaos. That's like a paradox, I guess, or a dichotomy. But cool.
So with this in mind, I'm going to make this kind of a book club video.
Kind of like, well, if it's a Q&A, that means that there's someone's asking questions. And what I've realized in the last week or so is that I've always, in a community like this, I've always thought that I have to be the one that has all the answers, which is mad. But we might get into that in this video, we might not. But I've realized that is actually mad. So this is like a Q&A, but with essentially the authors of this book via us, because when the question from a community, and this is why it is a community, because then it's like not one person has all the answers, is about how to live authentically. I think the concepts that this book share are a great answer to that question.
Right. So I really thank you for saying that.
The book is The Body Keeps the Score, which we reference a lot in the last few weeks. Or
talks about it on my TikTok as well.
It's really good, and we should have a section in Discord for books.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, write that down, or we'll remember it. Or somebody watching this remember it and help us.
Right. So I'm obsessed with this end part of the book where it's the putting the pieces together of, and it's like, what pieces?
And what's together?
So I'm just going to read a bit, and then we're going to talk about how it makes us feel. And if anyone else was in the conversation, we would have them jump in and how it made them feel. But
and if at any time I just jump off screen, it's because the dog's eating a pig's ear and we're not having another pig gate scandal. So
right. I agree. Okay. So are you ready for this fun reading experience?
This is good though. Go on.
Okay. We all know what happens when we feel humiliated. Oh no. We put all of our energy into protecting ourselves, developing whatever survival strategies we can. We may repress our feelings. We may get furious and plot revenge. We may decide to become so powerful and successful that nobody can ever hurt us again. Many behaviors that are classified as psychiatric problems, including some obsessions, compulsions, and panic attacks, as well as most self-destructive behaviors, started out as strategies for self-protection. These adaptations to trauma can so interfere with the capacity to function that healthcare providers and patients themselves often believe that full recovery is beyond reach.
Damn.
Viewing these symptoms as permanent disabilities narrows the focus of treatment to finding the proper drug regime, which can lead to lifelong dependence, as though trauma survivors were like kidney patients on dialysis. So those aren't my words, those are his words. And when I read that, I feel a certain way, but how do you feel?
I feel like when you were reading it, I was like, oh, I know how I feel, but now that I'm asked to put it into words, it is more difficult than it looks. But it really makes me feel like me, like that's me.
Mm. Right. And
Especially the shit about like why we plot revenge and get furious and then become so powerful and successful that nobody could ever hurt me again. Like that is me over the last few years in a nutshell, I think. And that's what I've been experiencing definitely the last couple of weeks, is how to heal that more. Because I think you first read that to me actually 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And when you first read that to me, I remember then being like, oh my God, that's me. Because that is all I've ever wanted to do. It's just become as, what the, I was just thinking, oh,
Oh, is it
just
really?
dropped on
I
me
thought
then.
it was a
No, it's
raindrop.
a stink bug on my leg. Shout out to stink bugs in the chat.
We live with a lot
Um,
of stink bugs.
yeah, I guess I realized that that's what I've just tried to do, is just become really successful and have so much money and success that nobody can hurt me again.
Mm. I'm glad that you picked up on that part specifically because I think that's very important to highlight. And because they are defensive strategies to protect us, like whatever parts they are.
Especially where, yeah, especially when it's like that. I thought you were talking specifically about the get rich and become powerful part, but it's the intentions behind it. And when I actually do explore my intentions behind those, what desires it has been for that, it's never been for like a good reason.
Mm.
And that's why it always runs out of steam for me,
Mm.
because I run out of steam because it's like, oh.
Interesting. That's a lot.
Is it really?
No.
I think I've shared that with you
Yeah.
before.
No, I know. I'm just saying I'm trying to understand it. Like, ooh, like I hope that you guys are finding this useful because it's about listening to each other and like learning that you're not alone. Like these are very complex concepts. And Joshua is like unveiling like layers and characters and intentions of things. And it's a lot of just emotional intelligence in the working. And that's what comes out when me and Joshua are in conversations is a lot of
Or tries to come out.
yeah, revelations and questioning and so on and so
Because
forth.
that's the power of talk therapy, just adding on that. If you just, that's why we do encourage people to just talk with other people and support us, is because it just happened to me there when Kate asked me how I felt and I had to verbalize my answer. I was like, oh, fuck. I don't know. I don't know how to use it. And then I tried and then I got closer. Because there are, I don't know about
Right,
you.
because
Do
I
you see
asked
it's
you
like,
what you thought about it instead of what you felt about
yeah,
it, because then I would
yeah,
ask you where's that
exactly.
feeling
Yeah,
within you. So I did ask the wrong question
no,
there. Well, not wrong question,
I
but
don't, no, I don't think, no, because you asked me how I felt about it.
okay. All
E-
right.
Either way,
The other part that I wanted to take from this paragraph was that it's not a permanent part of you. And I've explained this before, is that when I thought my anxiety was a permanent part of me or any other part of me, my anger or habits were permanent, I was felt a lot more down. Whereas if I just viewed it as a temporary symptom of something, then there we go. So
yeah, and just to add context, I guess, to how this may stop you. Do you want me to add?
Sure.
I just thought like about how this would stop you from living your authentic self. And that's again, people in this community seem to ask the best questions, and I wish other people were here to talk about, because they seem to be asking questions to me that I don't know the answer to, and then I have to be this new character where I'm like, damn, I don't think I know the answer to that. Because it's interesting to me that when I first read this, I realized that in these survival strategies, I wasn't living my authentic self. Instead, and if you watched the video last week or whenever we did the last Q&A, you'd have seen another like character that I've been playing, this one of these survival strategies, and like these plotting for revenge and shit. That for me, manifesting characters, and the more of those I'm like, what's that guy doing? It strips back to more and more to who is the authentic Josh. So I don't know.
Right. And just like the things that we view as permanent parts become parts of our identity,
Yeah.
instead of just like characters, like an anxious character, a depressed character.
Yeah.
That is fueled by
Yeah.
some sort of trigger. And we'll get into more about characters and this concept, because that's why I wanted to read through this, because it is
I like this style.
Okay. Should we go on that?
Yeah, next part. Oh, just quickly before next part, if you are watching this on replay / at all some way, please know that we want you in this conversation. So if you want to type comments back to wherever you're watching this, we'll get back to them.
Yeah, I agree. It's much more productive to see aggression or depression, arrogance or passivity as learned behaviors. Somewhere along the line, the patient came to believe that he or she could survive only if he or she was tough, invisible, or absent, or that it was safe to give up. Like traumatic memories that keep intruding until they are laid to rest, traumatic adaptations continue until the human organism feels safe and integrates all parts of itself that are stuck in fighting or warding off the trauma.
I'm gonna have to just read that again. But go on.
So what I get from that, what that makes me think is that this is something that was brought up in the community as well. I keep having these memories that flash up when I don't want them to flash up, and I'm brought into those emotional states. And
that's sorry, just to clarify, because why I didn't get the context, anybody else didn't. I didn't hear the word it's more productive. So it is much more productive to see aggression or depression, arrogance or passivity as learned behaviors. That's the key concept that I missed. So it's like, again,
what did you get from that then?
Well, you carry on, because I was just adding that because that's why I was so let me just reread that, because that makes more sense now. Somewhere along the line, the patient came to believe that he or she could survive only if he or she was tough. So like the learned behavior then would be acting tough, invisible or absent, or that it was safer to give up. Like traumatic memories that keep intruding until they're laid to rest, traumatic adaptations, i.e. the character not being authentic, survival, what I just spoke about, until the human organism feels safe and integrates all the parts of itself that are stuck in fighting or warding off the trauma. Damn. So what I take from that is that if you develop a character as kind of like a survival mechanism, and then that character comes with certain personality traits, if you can see that as learned behavior rather than just state of being, does that then make it easier to change?
Yeah, they're saying that you learned to do this. You learned to be depressed. You learned to be aggressive, or you learned to be passive.
Yeah.
These were learned things from maybe childhood. That's where a lot of we feel trauma is initiated, because our brains develop into what?
Damn, this shit's crazy. So to put if I could add context as to how that makes me feel, is that one of the characters that I developed like that wasn't my authentic self is the guy that is not well, like he needs more love and I didn't know about them, but I just used to create a not well character very often, somebody that wasn't well, even if things were okay. And an example of a memory that I've had is I was at school, I was like 14 or 15, and I've told you about this, but I got like my mom into school, all of the teachers, and basically told everybody that I had no friends. I had no friends. So then what they did at school is they take you off and start doing different kind of counseling or whatever. You get more attention from the teachers. And then more attention from my parents, and then also more attention from my friends because I never told them, and
Right,
the
because he
school didn't,
actually had
because I
friends.
actually did have a lot of friends. I was very popular, so it was like just the direct opposite of what it could be. And I think in that, creating complexity draws more attention.
Mhm.
So that character that is clearly learned behavior from some of the trauma that I've experienced, whatever that event may have been, but to show that it does just, the adaptation just continues until the trauma is put to rest. I was doing that shit last week.
Exactly. And
That's what I mean. It's like fucking hell.
Mhm.
So that same behavior has unconsciously happened for fucking
Yonks.
15, 16, 17 years.
Mm.
That's crazy to me. And I feel that, like, I feel that for self-protection, and especially the safer to give up. It's like whenever I start something, I just find it safer to just stop doing it. And all of that, it's just, I'm putting those pieces together for me. And if you're watching this and it's maybe confusing or you have more questions, just know that this has taken me a while to, I've read this a few times now, and now I'm like, oh, fucking no. That explains so much of my behavior.
That's why I've been taking, this is taking me over 3 months to read this book because
This is like
it's
a
so
university
depth.
course in one book.
Exactly. And Joshua is not alone in his seeking of attention. How many of us as children didn't have attention? Maybe divorced parents, maybe multiple kids, maybe both parents are working,
Mhm.
and I think it's funny in the social media world because I'm like, Joshua's seeking for attention. I could be seeking attention. And in the social media world, people seek attention. It's the word attention. Oh, this person has the most attention. So it's very interesting in
It
that.
is. It's like a bigger puzzle that we're looking at there. But I really like what's got happening, and the dog's getting close to this pig's ear, so I might be off in a minute. But
Okay.
next part, please.
Okay. It is much more productive. Oh, sorry. Every trauma survivor I've met is resilient in his or her own way, and every one of their stories inspires awe at how people cope. Knowing how much energy the sheer act of survival requires keeps me from being surprised at the price they often pay, the absence of a loving relationship with their own bodies, minds, and souls. Coping takes its toll. For many children, it is safer to hate themselves than to risk their relationship with their caregivers by expressing anger or by running away. As a result, abused children are likely to grow up believing that they are fundamentally unlovable. That was the only way their young minds could explain why they were treated so badly. They survive by denying, ignoring, and splitting off large chunks of reality. They forget the abuse, they suppress their rage or despair, they numb their physical sensations. If you were abused as a child, you are likely to have a childlike part living inside you that is frozen in time, still holding fast to this kind of self loathing and denial. Many adults who survive terrible experiences are caught in the same trap. Pushing away intense feelings can be highly adaptive in the short run. It may help you preserve your dignity and independence. It may help you maintain focus on critical tasks like saving a comrade, taking care of your kids, or rebuilding your house. The problems come later. A protective, so this part is about war. So I don't know if anyone in this community has experienced war, but this part is kind of violent. So for your discretion advised. The problems come later. After seeing a friend blown up, a soldier may return to civilian life and try to put the experience out of his mind. A protective part of him knows how to be competent at his job and how to get along with colleagues, but he may habitually erupt in rage at his girlfriend or become numb and frozen when the pleasure of surrendering to her touch makes him feel he is losing control. He probably will not be aware that his mind automatically associates passive surrender with the paralysis he felt when his friend was killed. So another protective part steps in to create a diversion. He gets angry, and having no idea what set him off, he thinks he's mad about something his girlfriend did. Of course, if he keeps blowing up at her and subsequent girlfriends, he will become more and more isolated. But he may never realize that a traumatized part is triggered by passivity and that another part, an angry manager, is stepping in to protect that vulnerable part. Helping these parts to give up their extreme beliefs is how therapy can save people's lives.
Damn.
I don't know how much you caught of that.
Yeah. Firstly, I think that should be all of the reading we do, because this is like.
I know, and I didn't
But
even get to the parts though that
all right,
are
maybe.
most important to me.
Okay, maybe we could do more, but I might just have to take a back seat. But that's because that's like crazy shit what I'm hearing there. That to me pieced together as you were reading it again, it's like piecing together why I haven't been authentic.
What do you mean?
Like how you when they described an action that they don't understand why they're doing, and especially like for example passivity or passivity, is that like I started to notice that one of the things I do for attention is indicate to somebody that I'm not doing okay, but then just refuse to talk and just be like, oh no, I'm fine, and then just look away in a certain way. And I've done this to you, and I've explained it to you because obviously you live with me, but it's a crazy
Yeah,
storm
it's
out there.
really gonna storm out there.
It's just like look away and be passive, and I've done that for a long time, and it made me think about that. And then I don't know, it just like this, like the how the multiple characters create like the ecosystem that is you. And I see how in the past, the super driven Josh that wants to achieve loads is just trying to make up and protect the really scared, vulnerable version of Josh. So the more successful, do you see how that it's like an ecosystem, and it's weird to think about yourself and the characters in those parts.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know. I don't want to stop the reading. I'm just saying for me, I might have to tap out. But that's really good because then people can take what they want from this and leave and just go, and we can talk about it multiple times.
Because I can't, but if it's too much information for you, then is it too much information for others?
I don't know. That's hard to gauge. That's why this is.
Okay. Well, I think I could keep going, and then with that in mind, you can always pause the video and come back to it.
Yeah, keep going.
Let's do that.
Yeah, definitely.
So you don't want to be in this conversation?
No, I'm going to be here. I'm just saying.
The dog is going crazy, and it's probably the storm. He's probably not experienced a spring storm like this before. It's really
gaining it down. Just mute my microphone, and I'll just listen from behind the camera. Much love, everybody.
Which one is you? Oh, okay. Hello. 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 Well, are you sure? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, that was just a short intermission. So I hope that maybe you went to the bathroom or grabbed a snack or something, because we get back in it, baby. So let's do this. So he mentions another part of this back in the book, but this is really important right here. A central task for recovery from trauma is to learn to live with the memories of the past without being overwhelmed by them in the present. And we talked about this before. As long as you have intense emotional swings around your memories, it'll be more difficult to recover from them. Most survivors, including those who are functioning well, even brilliantly, in some aspects of their lives, face another even greater challenge: reconfiguring a brain/mind system that was constructed to cope with the worst. Just as we need to revisit traumatic memories in order to integrate them, we need to revisit the parts of ourselves that developed the defensive habits that helped us survive. So basically what this is saying is that with every traumatic memory that you have, there's an also a associated character to it. And just as you have to work through the memories of the past in order to assimilate them into your timeline, because as I mentioned in a comment in the general chat, when our minds are in these traumatic memories, they just exist in this right brain emotional limbo, and we must integrate them into our timeline in order to move on. And the same thing goes for each one of the parts. So when you see Joshua working in real time through his characters, that is him healing his trauma. And that's the same thing that, we get on a call, I can help you work through too. You're not alone in this. So, okay, let's keep going. The mind is a mosaic. We all have parts. Right now, a part of me feels like taking a nap. Another part wants to keep writing. Still feeling injured by an offensive email message, a part of me wants to hit reply with a stinging put down, while a different part of me wants to shrug it off. Most people who know me have seen my intense, sincere, and irritable parts. Some have met the snarling dog that lives inside me. My children reminisce about going on family vacations with my playful and adventurous parts. I thought this was super powerful because this is the contrast that we feel between our characters every single day, constantly. Oh, am I this person or am I this person? Do I do this or do I not do this? And anyone who sees me in front of a camera may think a certain way about me or speaks to me, think, oh, I'm the most pure soul there is. But I also have an aggression that's a fiery side of me that only like Joshua sees and my parents see or my family see. So it's something that it all exists in us. We all have parts. That's how he started this. So when you walk into the office in the morning and see the storm clouds over your boss's heads, you know precisely what is coming. That angry part has a characteristic tone of voice, vocabulary, and body posture. So different from yesterday when you shared pictures of your kids. Parts are not just feelings, but distinct ways of being with their own beliefs, agendas, and roles in the overall ecology of our lives. So how stereotypical is this where you like the angry boss? And it's like, is your boss really that angry person? You always wonder what's going on in his personal life that's making him become angry or be this angry person and show up as him at work. And it's all because of what we're talking about here, different parts. And it says parts are not just feelings, but distinct ways of being. You know, like he said, it changed his body posture, it changed his vocabulary. And each of the characters, I feel like when I'm aware of my characters, each one of them talk very differently. And it's just, I'm hoping this gives you a little bit of sanity knowing that, you know, it's okay to accept that you do have different parts of you. Um, okay, so let's move on. How well we get along with ourselves depends largely on our internal leadership skills. How well we listen to our different parts, make sure they feel taken care of, and keep them from sabotaging one another. So, you know, be the leader of when you accept that you have parts, you have to be the leader of those parts. And right. That's what they think is that the authentic self is the one that is the leader that can watch over the characters and understand them for what they are. It's a level of consciousness, and consciousness in this book is synonymous with the word self. So keep that in mind.
So I'm just off camera, but that was very interesting. That's what you said, because obviously this is how to become more authentic, and that is definitely helping me, is trying to become more aware of the leader and watch the other characters. So if this is resonated at all and you see these characters come out, you can like watch them and ask, and I'm sure Kate's going to get to this, but that feels like the first step is seeing that you do have one of these kind of like leader characters, and then to observe all the other ones.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for bringing it back to the point. That's definitely true. I feel that. I really feel that. Parts often come across as absolutes when in fact they represent only one element in a complex constellations of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. So I hope this is just expanding your mind of what your mind is actually doing, because it is all just ludicrous. Every major school of psychology recognizes that people have subpersonalities and give them different names. In 1980, William James wrote, "It must be admitted that the total possible consciousness may be split into parts which coexist but mutually ignore each other and share the objects of knowledge between them." So he can see that people have subpersonalities in the consciousness, and that they can ignore each other, but then they also share information, which is all of what the system is. Carl Jung wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system that maintains its equilibrium just as the body does. The natural state of human psyche consists in the jostling together of its components and in their contradictory behavior, and the reconciliation of these opposites is a major problem. Thus, the adversary is none other than the other in me. So this is like when you feel yourself judging yourself, and it's just you're like, why is this happening? And it's just our minds are just constantly moving and like trying to create equilibrium. Just think about the homeostasis and the regulating of your body. Your mind's doing the same thing with the characters and the emotions. It's trying to find a place of equilibrium and a place of peace. So this is just me giving you background information about why this living your authentic self is really difficult, because it's these concepts of characters. So modern neuroscience has confirmed this notion of the mind as a kind of society. Michael Gazinga, who conducted pioneering split brain research, concluded that the mind is composed of semi-autonomous functioning modules, each of which has a special role. In his book, The Social Brain, he writes, "But what of the idea that the self is not a unified being, and there may exist within us several realms of consciousness?" So, from our split brain studies, the new idea emerges that there are literally several selves, and they do not necessarily converse with each other internally. Like, why do you think that it's so difficult to understand what you should do or what you shouldn't do, or what feels right or what feels wrong or good or bad, when you've got characters within you that aren't conversing, and it's just multiple realms of consciousness happening at any given time? I don't know. This is like a lot to grasp even for me. And so if you're watching this, and I hope this is just a continuous resource that you can come back to, or get the book, man. But he continues to say that the legend of the single self can only divert us from the target of that inquiry. It can make sense to think there exists inside your brain a society of different minds, like members of a family. The different minds can work together to help each other, each still having its own mental experiences that the others never know about. So when you keep this in mind, it's like this person's argument or statement or idea is that self is not just one thing. Self is just a lot of different characters happening in your mind. And he calls it a family, that you have a family in your mind and that each one plays a different role. And to me, this makes sense, because I'm like, I've got a character that's like my mom and my dad and my brothers. And I'm like, geez Louise, like, this is just so funny. So sit with that for a second, that self, the legend of the single self, can only divert us from the target of the inquiry, that there lives a society in our mind. Okay. Therapists who are trained to see people as complex human beings with multiple characteristics and potentialities can help them explore their system of inner parts and take care of the wounded facets of themselves. So that's what I'm trying to do, as I'm trying to, here at Simply Port, I'm not a therapist, but I'm trying to see you as a complex human being. I don't just see you as one thing that you've said to me at one given point. Like, I know that you're a universe, a cosmos of things. And I just want you to know that you are safe to be all parts of whoever you are here. No judgment, no judgment. So basically, these people, so after this dude Richard Schwartz, the developer of internal family systems therapy, IFS, it was through his work that the metaphor came to this dude and offered a systematic way for him to split the parts and result of trauma. So at the core of IFS, family systems therapy, is the notion that the mind of each of us is like a family in which the members have different levels of maturity, excitability, wisdom, and pain. The parts form a network or system in which change in any one part will affect all of the others. So one character trying to be changed will affect all of your characters, all of your family members, the family members of your mind, and like different levels of maturity, excitability, wisdom, and pain. definitely. I have characters that are so childlike, other characters that are wise, other ones that are sad, others that hold so much pain, and others that are just straight up obnoxious. So it's just, I feel this completely. And I hope that it's helping you find more peace within yourself and all of your characters, and being like, oh, it's okay that I have all of these because I'm not alone. So the IFS model helped me realize that dissociation occurs on a continuum. In trauma, the self system breaks down and parts of the self become polarized and go to war with one another. Self loathing coexists and fights with grandiosity, loving care with hatred, numbing impassivity with rage and aggression. These extreme parts bear the burden of trauma. So, this is just really all important information, but it's just saying the contrast that we feel every single day, like, oh, I love myself, oh, I hate myself. That could be a sign that you may be experiencing trauma currently from your past traumatic experiences. In IFS, a part is considered not just passing emotional state or customary thought pattern, but distinct mental system with its own history, abilities, needs, and worldviews. And it's like, say you're given a character that says believes all of one thing, and then the next day you believe all of the other thing because you're operating out of the other character. It's like, why do you think that getting through life authentically is so difficult? It's just madness here. I'm trying to find up a part that is most useful, because like Joshua said, this is a lot. Okay, so this I think is very important, which is, it's all very important. So I know I'm jumping ahead now, but if one accepts the basic idea that people have an innate drive towards nurturing their own health, this implies that when people have chronic problems, something gets in the way of assessing inner resources. Recognizing this, the role of therapists is to collaborate rather than teach, confront, or fill holes in your psyche. The first step in this collaboration is to assure the internal system that all parts are welcome, and that all of them, even those that are suicidal or destructive, were formed in an attempt to protect their self system, no matter how much they now seem to threaten them. So, to threaten it. So, just as this dude saying that all parts are welcome, all parts are welcome here. All parts are welcome here, and simply support, and you created all these characters, all these parts to protect yourself. But you know, maybe they're not protecting you anymore, and that's why you're here, and that's why you're learning more about self and these concepts of the mind, and it all is a lot to take in. So take your time with this information. IFS recognizes that the cultivation of mindful self-leadership is the foundation for healing from trauma. Mindfulness not only takes it's possible to survey our internal landscape with compassion and curiosity, but also actively steer us in the right direction for self-care. All systems, families, organizations, or nations cooperate effectively only if they have clearly defined and competent leadership. So this part blew my mind specifically, because I had been someone was like, oh, well, why do we even need leadership? Leadership is just silly, like, why can't we all just be one and collaborate? And then I read this and I was like, self-leadership, good. So then I was like, okay, so then why did I believe that leadership was not a quote unquote good thing? And I think it's because of the leaders that I've perceived in my life. And I haven't felt like, oh, I've got a really great leader. I have good leaders through books and things like that. So I guess I should trust in that. But for the most part, I had been confused on what a good leader is, especially when it comes to communities and nations and families and all of that. Because think about, if you didn't have a leadership role within your family, then how are you supposed to even know what leadership is, or what type of leader you want to be, or how to lead your own mind and whatever it's going on with it? It's all just a lot of information. And I really hope this is helping. Okay. So this is something that authentic self. So the first step is, so the concept of mindfulness into the realm of active leadership. So let's start getting active leadership over these characters. We've reached that part of the chapter because I think a lot of what we've talked about is like clear. We've got multiple characters, and that through mindfulness, we can become aware of these characters and start to work through them. So he says that the first step is that this self does not need to be cultivated or developed. Beneath the surface of the protective parts of trauma survivors, there exists an undamaged essence, a self that is confident, curious, and calm, a self that has been sheltered from destruction by the various protectors that have emerged in their efforts to ensure survival. Once those protectors trust that it is safe to separate, the self will spontaneously emerge and the parts can be enlisted in the healing process. So, what this is basically saying is that your self, your essence of self, is already within you. And all of the characters, so there could be like all of these characters that are blocking and hazing the true self, because one character comes up and then to protect you, and then another character comes up to protect you, then another character comes up to protect you, then another character comes up, and you're just like not knowing what the self is. And they know that self is a very specific part of the brain that illuminates right here in the mohawk version portion of your head. And from this place of self, when you're accessing that, that's when you know that you're not acting out of one of your characters that's protecting you, because all of your characters are extreme like emotional states of like anger or sadness or this or that. So that's the first thing that they say to accept in this, is that you may have characters that are protecting you, but also fogging and making your true authentic self hazy. So the second assumption is that rather than being a passive observer, this mindful self can help reorganize the inner system and communicate with the parts in a way that help those parts trust that there is someone inside who can handle things. So secondly, that he's asking the self to no longer just take a back seat in the inner system, but communicate with the parts and lead them. You know, if you have that inner judge in you that's like, you're not loved, this or that, self can come up and be like, is that necessarily true? And and it's like, all right, was a typical downer person is like, all right, downer, you just sit there for a minute. We recognize that you have been damaged and you have been told that you are unloved, but it's okay because we're loved now and we're supported now. All right, so that's the second step, is to want to help organize your characters and trust that you are self. So mindfulness increases activation of the medial prefrontal cortex, like I talked about, and decreases activation of structures like the amygdala that trigger our emotional responses. This increases our control over the emotional brain. So this was, I was just explaining, when we're in our essence of self and we've worked through the characters, that means we're operating out of here instead out of our emotional brains here or anywhere else, you know what I mean? So it's just the self. So there's this is the last section that I'm going to read, and then we must move on. But the task of the therapist. So maybe just be your own therapist. Like, you've got this book. If you need help, you do have help here. You do have support here and Simply Support, and you can go get a therapist. That's fine with me, because if this is all a lot of information and I am doing it here on my own and I'm just trusting myself and working with Joshua, but you have support here. So just making that clear. So the task of the therapist is to help patients separate this confusing blend into separate entities so that they're able to say, this part of me is like a little child and this part of me is more mature but feels like a victim. They might not like many of these parts, but identifying them makes them less intimidating or overwhelming. So the first step is being like, oh, this character feels this way. Well, this character feels this way. The next step is to encourage patients to simply ask each protective part as it emerges to stand back temporarily so that we can see what it is protecting. When this is done again and again, the parts begin to unblend from the self and make space for mindful self-observation. Patients learn to put their fear, rage, or disgust on hold and open up into states of curiosity and self-reflection. From the stable perspective of self, they can begin constructive inner dialogues with their parts. Wow. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. This has been a crazy lecture, by the way. But to add context or maybe an example of what that actually means, I think in real time is kind of what I did explain earlier. But last week after the Q&A, we spoke and Kate was like, who is this character that you keep playing? You know, as Kate being there, she was like, who is it? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, you know, you've got all the self-esteem in the world and you're always telling me about your ideas and you're always excited and you're always doing things. And for the most part, it does always work out for me. But when it comes to doing anything with my show or Simply Support or the businesses that I run, you play this guy that has no confidence and no self-esteem. And I was like, damn, I was like, that's really true. She was like, who is that character? And over the last week or so, I've explored it. And it's just a very scared young version of me trying to protect itself that doesn't want to be seen by the world. And where that comes from, I don't know. I haven't investigated it too much more. Well, we have. It just hasn't. This takes time, you know. Like this isn't just
This
oh,
isn't
it's figured
just
out, done.
done.
It's the realizations come to me more and more. And as you've clearly seen, like I have to take my time with this because it gets very overwhelming for me, and that's okay. You know, so it's
Because
okay.
he's experiencing this in real time. He's not pausing me. You can pause me at any point.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to add that to context because then when I realized that, I was just like, oh, that's what it's brought up to protect. That's the behavior. And then it allowed me to, I guess, heal that and move on from it more. And I'm still in the process of doing that. But yeah, I hope that
But you
helps.
feel it's more clear now that you've had this information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because it makes me aware of like, especially when you were talking about the characters in conflict with each other, because that's a very common thread of mine as well over the last few years, is that I'm my own worst enemy and everything can be going really well. And then all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, well, for all these reasons, I have to tear it down. And it's just like that was another character fighting with another character.
Yeah.
So it's like, damn.
Yeah. I
And
have.
also what you said about, sorry, meditation and mindfulness. And what really has helped me is that every morning when I wake up at like 4 or 5, between 4 and 5:30 with the dog, depending on just when he's hungry, really. I try to take at least 10-15 minutes of just sitting there to just like kind of recalibrate with who I am and myself and who I want to be the up and coming day.
Because
And
you don't know what character can wake up in the morning.
exactly. And to be fair, the mornings that I don't do that are usually the ones where I just wake up the day as any character and then can just do anything rather than the one I quote unquote want to be, or the one that feels the best,
The
which
one that
is
feels like self.
Mm.
That's beautiful, honey. Thank you for sharing that.
It's all right.
The dog is being a lunatic per usual, but all right, let's keep on keeping on.
Yeah, I would I don't know how much longer you have to
Oh,
add. I'm just saying from a time point of view, this is a lot of information. You could probably separate this into multiple videos.
okay.
So that would just be, I would look to wrap it up
Okay.
because all of this is just a whole new thing, really.
Well, I said I was gonna stop here, but it basically, okay, just let me finish this last statement. Patients are asked to identify the part involved in the current problem, like feeling worthless, abandoned, or obsessed with vengeful thoughts. As they ask themselves, what inside me feels that way? An image may come to mind. Maybe the depressed part looks like an abandoned child or an aging man or an overwhelmed nurse taking care of the wounded, vengeful part may appear as a combat marine or a member of a street gang. Next, the therapist asks, how do you feel toward the sad, vengeful, terrified part of you? This sets the stage for mindful self-observation by separating the you from the part in a question. If the patient has extreme response like, I hate it, the therapist knows that there's another protective part blended with self. He or she might then ask, See if that part that hates it would step back. Then the protective part is often thanked for its vigilance and assured that it can return at any time that it is needed. If the protective part is willing, the follow-up question is, how do you feel toward the previously rejected part now? The patient is likely to say something like, I wonder why it is so sad, vengeful, etc. This sets the stage for getting to know the part better, for example, by inquiring how old it is and how it came to feel like the way it does.
Damn.
Once a patient manifests a critical mass of self, this kind of dialogue begins to take place spontaneously. At this point, it's important for the therapist to step aside and just keep an eye out for the other parts that might interfere or make occasional empathetic comments or ask questions like, what do you say to the part about that? Where do you want to go now? What feels like the right next step? As well as ambiguous self-detecting questions. How do you feel towards that part right now? That part now.
Damn.
So this happens to me in real time where Joshua will like, I'll say something and then I'll be like, I just hate that I am that way, or I just feel so silly that I'm that way. And then it's like, oh, that's a character on top of a character.
Double characters.
Double characters. How fun. One protecting the other. That's so sweet. Because it's like, oh, the weak Kate, or she's so weak. I hate her, or she's so vulnerable. It's so silly. And it's just, this is a lot, guys. But I can't just be asked how to live your authentic self and give a simple answer, because there is no simple, I mean, there is a simple answer to it. I'm reading it to it now. And
yeah, but I know what Kate's basically saying is she's just, and I guess as you were reading that, I was thinking, oh, there's definitely a character I play that tries to protect you. I do that probably too much as well, because I'm like, well, you could just let it rip, because this is just great information and you can just work through it at your own time. Like, it really is probably just my fear, actually. So yeah. Look at this big man.
But I think that if I could just end there, that would be really great, because we've introduced all of the concepts that I think allow a first step to take place, which is just, like we said, acceptance that there may be a self. And then I feel like in this video, I've shared ways to start to break apart the characters and start to name them, so to say. Like, me and Joshua have been doing that recently. We're like, oh, well, what do we want to name that character? Because we want to call that character out when he comes out, because we want him to be kind of managed
like
more.
For example, I have catastrophizing Colin.
Oh my gosh, where he has to like start fights and throw things at people and come up with like really.
I never start fights or throw anything, actually. What?
That's what I'm saying. So the self of Joshua doesn't like to fight people and doesn't like to throw things and be aggressive. But this part of him is like, what if I just threw this rock through this window?
That's not the character I was thinking of.
Actually. Oh, okay. You weren't? Oh.
But that is also another character.
You're like, what if I just punched that person right in the face? I'm like, Joshua.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
say
not
that,
just Joshua.
And
it's a character that he created because those sort of comments get reactions, and it's just our life. So these are the characters. I've got so many characters too. It's just obscure. Joshua can.
I think everybody does though, because life
point.
is multifaceted. But the overarching theme of this is that we are all looking for, quote unquote, our truest, most authentic self. And really, what may have, the only thing I would change about this is defining our terms at the start, because what is actually the authentic self. And for me, it's just the one that feels the best and it spends its time, the majority of its time, feeling peaceful and lovable, or in love, or as love. That's what I always think. So that's the question. So what I am encouraging you guys to do, same as what we're doing, is to create an ecosystem, because you're not always going to just be one character, you know, unless you want to be. It's likely that you're going to have multiple personalities for different events, people, etc. It's just making sure that the overall ecosystem of all of them results in you feeling good way more often than you feel bad. Because if you don't, just because it's making it blurry, is that you feel good more than you feel bad. And if that's not the case, that's why this literally why we have just spent 58 minutes, Kate more than me, talking about this, is to help you work through this, because trying to deal with it all yourself, you're just with yourself and all of these things going on. And and having somebody to just rebound it is good. And also long term, and this is why Kate has set up the groups. I can't remember what you call them, global pods,
Global
groups, is that this isn't just a one-time fix for the most part. You don't just all of a sudden be like, oh, well, I'm just not going to do any of those characters. And if you spend time with people long enough, they'll see the characters. Like I see Kate, we haven't come up with a name, but Kate plays sometimes like a really sad child version of Kate. And it's really sad. It's like a really sad story. Everything's against her. It's all da da da. And the more
There's
I see,
no hope.
yeah, there's more I see that I'm just like, oh, not that bloody one again. You know, that kind of energy where it's like, hang on a minute, look, and then Kate's like, oh, fucking hell. You know, it's the same for me when I go to do catastrophizing or steal attention or any of these things. Kate's just like, hold on, and
Yeah.
that's good for you as well to have that accountability. So,
Right. Screaming Sally. That's another one of mine.
screaming
I
Sally.
freaking scream. So, yeah, I encourage anyone who's made this all the way to the end to explore this concept of mindfulness. Sit down in a silent place with a piece of paper and see what comes up. Maybe it isn't self right away, maybe it is a character, but then give yourself to picture. So if it's like a sad character, be like, who is this character? Who started this character? Why did I start this character? What does it make me feel? You know, just sit there and ask yourself questions and be comfortable with it, because this is how healing happens, is through those quiet moments by yourself, asking yourself questions and just picking it apart. So I hope this was useful for you, and there is support for you here in all of what you're experiencing, as Joshua has said. Okay.
Yeah, much love. This has been great.
Much love. We'll put this to rest, baby.
Peace.
Peace.